Welcome back to Climbing Psychology. Today I'll be doing a bit of a different video. I'll be talking about my experience with my finger injury, and I will describe a bit the dynamics, how I realized that I was injured, how I injured myself, and how was the process of getting a proper diagnosis. Because I was pretty sure it was an A2 pulley tear, but in the end it was not. And of course I did a lot of research on the internet, on YouTube, and I went to see doctors, physical therapists, and it took a very long time to get the proper diagnosis. So let's get right into it. Okay, so I was trying to train for the bouldering championships, and I was specifically training for roof climbing. I've always been kind of bad, let's say, with the roof climbing, with the technique, but it's also a lot of strain on the fingers. So I was doing this kind of training, and then I went to Telefonplan in Klättercentret, and there is a tunnel. It's a very overhanging roof, let's say, and I was training on a 7A plus there. That was very crimpy, and I could feel that the finger strength wasn't enough to be able to do the crux and continue and complete the route. Well, that wasn't when I injured myself. After that day, I was there only for a 1-day trip, so I did go pretty intense on that route, but then I took a day off. And the following day, I got back to my club and I started warming up. And then, unfortunately, I started warming up with something that was too hard and too fingery. So I did the first move. I reached for the next hold, but I said, there is something wrong with my finger. My finger is not okay. And at first it was hard to say what kind of pain, where, how localized. But after a couple of hours, I noticed that it was a ring finger on the right hand, and I could feel it on the top of the knuckle, which made little sense to me, really, because I was supposed to have pain on the base of the finger, and I did not, basically. So I was pretty confused. Then after some days, I started feeling the pain at the base of the finger. So I said, okay, probably A2 pulley tear. But another very weird thing was that my pain wasn't that intense. Really, I could do many activities. So for example, when I was crimping, even on my hand, I could feel some discomfort, but nothing too serious. But my friends that had pulley injuries said they hurt a lot. You have no swelling, don't have that excruciating pain. So it felt a bit weird. Then I said, okay, probably just a finger tweak. And that was on the 29th of January. As I said, I was preparing for the bouldering championships. So I hadn't planned another competition, which was the Blocks BLX comp. It was on the 11th of February. And I was saying, if it's a finger tweak, then of course I rested for 2 weeks. And then I said, let's see how it goes. Let's see how my finger feels. I started warming up. I started doing a bit of light rehab, keeping it moving so that it gets all the nutrients that it needs to heal. And I could basically climb stuff that is not super finger intensive. And also the most issues I had were with jugs. And it made very little sense. Jugs were painful because they were pushing directly here. But even looking at the internet with A2 pull injuries, people don't show that kind of intense pain when climbing on jugs. So basically, climbing on crimps hurt less than climbing on jugs, and that made very little sense to me. But I don't know, everyone's body is different, right? The 11th of February arrives, and I decided to participate to the BLX comp with very light attitude, and say very conservative, for sure, very conservative. It was very weird because I could do all the boulders, I could do almost all the moves. I tried some boulders of other categories, and they were a bit too finger intensive for my hand, for my finger, but I could participate to the competition normally, and I didn't have any kind of increased pain the following day. nothing at all. It was weird, and like I talked to some coaches there, like I said, how are you here competing if you have a pulley injury? And I said, I don't know, it's probably just a finger tweak, but I feel like I'm able, I don't feel pain, basically, not too much pain in doing the boulders. And of course I was fully taped, very taped, but it was fine. It was really fine. So 1 month has passed, and a finger tweak supposedly should come back to normal after around a month, especially if you do some light rehab. Of course, I did seek professional help. At the same time, I contacted the healthcare, contacted the clinic that I go for rehabbing, for physiotherapy, and they just suggested me to rest, basically. They couldn't really tell what kind of issues I had. I didn't get any like ultrasound or stuff. Probably they were not specialized in climbing injuries, so they didn't really know. They just said rest. I, of course, followed a bit of Hooper's, Beta's videos and do some light rehab, of course, very conservative, but it was the best kind of advice that I could receive. Then what happens is that I notice that there is a kind of a bump in my finger. So if I press, I wouldn't say super hard, but if I pressed on the finger, I could feel a kind of a little bump. Very, very small. You don't see it with the eyes, really. And I considered it swelling on the A2 pulley. And I also asked other people, yeah, it might be swelling and so on. But it felt a bit weird to me. So I insisted with the healthcare system. And I go through like different doctors until I found an orthopedic specialist in sport injuries and injuries of the hand. And I went to see him. I told him like my weird story, that at the start it was painful here, then it got painful here. My open hand didn't really hurt that much, but when I squeeze, when I pinch open-handed, it hurts, which also was a bit weird. And crimps are not too bad, especially if I tape, and I can full crimp, like with the joint completely extended or hyper extended without having too much pain. Again, very weird. And then I told him about the bump. He touched. I was like, yeah, your A2 pulley is absolutely fine. You have no full rupture. Maybe there could be a little tear, but as I said, it rested a long time. The pain that you feel is not because of the A2 pulley. Your A2 pulley, your pulleys, your nerves and your flexor tendons are all fine. What you have is a ganglion. So I did hear about ganglions from a friend of mine that had it on the wrist. And the wrist is the most common type of ganglion. But let's talk a bit what ganglions are. So of course I am absolutely no specialist. Hooper, please make a video of this. I think people would be very interested because there's so little information about this kind of climbing injury. And I think many people that believe have an A2 pulley injury might have this, especially if they feel that there's something in their finger. So a ganglion is a liquid-filled area in the joint capsule, or as in my case, in the tendon sheath, that has bulged out on one side.
The flexor tendon sheath surrounds the flexor tendon, and a rent or tear in that sheath can cause a cyst to form with the fluid. This can occur most commonly at the A1 pulley, most commonly in the long finger, and we can approach this either conservatively via aspiration or surgically. And surgical excision creates the best recurrence rates, which are very low.
The bulging is due to the extra pressure that is on weaker areas and cannot sustain basically the pressure of the synovial fluid. So ganglions are usually harmless, even though they might be painful. And they usually go away in around 50% of the cases in around 2 days, after 2 days of rest. But they can stay for a longer time. They are also called Bible bumps because originally people treated them with a smack with the Bible on top of it.
It's Brittany, you got to, we're filming. What is that?
Did it do it? I think it did it. Come on.
Because then the cyst is breaking, the fluid goes around the joint, then it gets reabsorbed, and you're completely fine. At least unless it comes back. So for some people, it never comes back. For some people, it gets back recursively. Now, that is not suggested, and of course my cyst on the finger is very small, so it's very hard to whack it with the Bible. But what I'm trying to do now, as suggested by the doctor, is that I massage it, and hopefully it will get reabsorbed, or it will get smacked by climbing, basically. But if it doesn't, and since it's painful, the doctor said that I could remove it with a siren, so the fluid will get drained. And in case then it comes back, because that is not like a definitive treatment, and is also not a recommended treatment, but there's always the option of surgery. And surgery has shown that is like the best kind of treatment because it prevents it from coming again. So now this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna come back to climbing. I started already climbing harder things, and again, I noticed that I didn't lose much strength. It just gets painful, and it's very hard to understand whether the pain response is because there is a tissue damage or just because there's this cyst that is pushing on other structures. So I'm trying to be as cautious as possible, and I think I will get the liquid removed with a siren very soon, because it is pretty painful. It is pretty painful. But at the same time, it's nice to know that there is no real damage on my pulley, and it's nice that it's to know what I have. Of course, my experience is unique in the sense that it doesn't make science, and also like you might have a ganglion cyst without having the pain on the top of the joint. Absolutely. As I said, we need some experts to do some information about this. But I hope this was informative. I hope that you might find it interesting. I'll see you in the next video. Stay psyched.